February 9th is a happy anniversary for people who like nuclear missiles, because it was on this date, back in 1959, that the first ever ICBM became operational, the R-7 Semyorka at Plesetsk. And yes, you're right, it was a Soviet weapon. Americans didn't just panic over Sputnik because that little otherwise trivial beeping insolent satellite indicated that the hated Ruskies were getting ahead in the scientific race and that American students better hit the math books hard or be left in the communist dust. Though it is interesting, the current obsession with STEM in schools, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, it's actually a trend that is so out of date that it began back when men wore hats. But the other problem was that if the Soviets had a rocket that could put a satellite into space, it could also put a nuclear warhead up there and drop it onto a ballistic course that would have it descend inexorably towards your house. Now, once both sides developed reliable solid fuel missiles that could be launched on warning, they did bring a certain stability to superpower relations. I will go so far as to say it is inconceivable to me that there would not have been a third World War primarily centered on land combat in Europe by the 1980s if it weren't for the nuclear balance of terror. And intellectuals rather eagerly embraced the idea that they were allowed to be ferociously anxious because they were nuclear weapons. I think they were just looking for an excuse. There was a certain benefit to a nuclear standoff, but that's all that I have to say on the subject that's good here. In most ways, the R-7 is a classic Soviet story, including that they never would admit what their actual name was for the thing. They always were so secretive in arms control negotiations that NATO had to use its own names. In this case, it was the SS-6 Sapwood. It's kind of weird that the Soviets would say, "Trust us," through gritted teeth, and when you ask them, "What do you call that rocket?" they say, "We're not telling you that." But the Semyorka was also a classic Soviet weapon in that it was a beast. It weighed something like 280 tons. It was well over 100 feet long. It burned kerosene and liquid oxygen. And it took about 20 hours to fuel up, and it could not be left on standby, so it was only a first strike weapon. It also wasn't very accurate or reliable. It did give rise to a family of rockets that never got the Soviets to the moon and that failed more often than they worked. But it also, combined with Khrushchev's belligerent rhetoric, scared the heck out of people. I should note that its reliability was not enhanced by the fact that it was in Plesetsk, which is something even Russians might consider in the middle of nowhere with bad weather. It's 500 miles northeast of Moscow. It's not surprising that nothing worked there. But this really was a classic piece of Soviet weaponry. It was big, it was menacing, it was unreliable, and it scared people so much that they had to build a bunch of weapons in response. So February 9th is not really a happy anniversary after all, is it? If you're enjoying these commentaries, please go to my website, that's www.johnrobson.ca, and make a monthly pledge to help me continue my work. And of course, keep watching and subscribing to The Rebel, where you get news and commentary you will not get anywhere else.